Since my last video about bat species in the UK was much more popular than I thought it was going to be, I've decided to make a follow-up video where I'm going to talk about more of our native bat species, as well as some more occasional vagrants that pop up here that aren't native but you might still be able to see. If you haven't seen part 1 of these bat videos, then I've linked it down below for you to watch, but it doesn't really matter which order you watch these videos in because I'm talking about different species in both of them. Make sure that you do watch both videos though, to give you a full picture of all of the bat species in the UK. Welcome to Ferrophorus. If you're interested in British nature, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. We're going to kick this video off straight away by discussing the Bechstein's bat, which is one of our rarest bat species. The IUCN, or International Union for the Conservation of Nature, keeps a list of the conservation status of the world species. This is known as the Red List, and it's actually available online if you're ever curious about the conservation status of a species. You can see here that across Europe, the Bechstein's bat is listed as vulnerable, with a decreasing population trend. There are various categories that species can fall into, based on meeting a variety of criteria, with vulnerable meaning that this species is considered to be at high risk of extinction in the wild, but not such a high risk that it gets placed in the next and more commonly referred to category of endangered. Like many of our native bat species, the Bechstein's bat has declined largely due to a loss of habitat. This species relies quite heavily on mature woodlands, and the loss of ancient deciduous woodland in the UK has really impacted them. They've gone from quite an abundant number across the UK to quite rare, and it's now only really possible to catch a glimpse of them if you're in southern Wales or England. The government have defined certain parts of land across the UK as SACs, or Special Areas of Conservation. A Special Area of Conservation protects one or more special habitats or species. 6 SACs have been identified primarily due to the presence of the Bechstein's bat. These are the Bath and Bradford-on-Avon Bats SAC, where Bechstein's bats hibernate in abandoned mines, the Beer Quarry and Caves SAC, where they hibernate in abandoned mines, the Brackett's Coppice SAC, where maternity colonies roost in bat boxes, the Bridlesford Copses SAC, which supports a breeding population of the bats, the Chilmark Quarries SAC, where the bats hibernate in abandoned mines, and the Urbano Common SAC, where a maternity colony roosts in the live mature oak tree woodland. Although research grants have been set aside to study the Bechstein's bat, it's quite difficult for researchers to actually find this species because their call is very quiet and can be hard to pick up on a bat detector. From one of our rarest bat species to one of our most common ones, the next bat that we're going to be talking about is the brown long-eared bat. Despite being so common, it's actually quite hard to find these bats because they're actually another very quiet bat species and very difficult to pick up on bat detectors. In fact, I've only ever picked up one on my detector, and that's because it was swooping down really low right above me. And even then, listen to how quiet the echolocation call that I picked up was. With how quiet brown long-eared bats are, it's not surprising that they've earned themselves the nickname of the whispering bat. Taking a look at this bat, it's easy to understand why their echolocation calls are so quiet. Just look at the size of those ears, almost as long as its body. There's no need to shout when you can hear so much around you. These bats are expert hunters in light woodlands and gardens thanks to those impressive ears, but they do need to take care of them by keeping them safe and tucking them out of the way under their wings when they're resting. In late spring, across the majority of the UK, brown long-eared bats will come together to form maternity roosts. These roosts are where groups of females will all roost in the same space in order to raise their young. Brown long-eared bats are actually quite an interesting species because unlike a lot of our other bats, the males actually join the maternity roosts and will roost together alongside the females while they're raising their young. However, like most bat species, as soon as the young have grown up enough to be able to fly and act independently, all of the bats will then spread out on their own or in small groups and be roosting like that in small groups until they come together the next year to form the next maternity roost. Very similar in appearance to the brown long-eared bat is the much rarer grey long-eared bat. This species was actually thought to be part of the brown long-eared bat species until a big genetic exploration in the 1960s found that their genetics were actually made them into two very distinct species. Since this discovery, it's actually been noted that grey long-eared bats tend to be a bit larger and have a bit of a darker face than their brown long-eared relatives. But why is the grey long-eared bat so much rarer? Well, there's a couple of really interesting papers I found that focus on this species in the UK. As you can see by this map, the UK is actually on the northern edge of the species range, with grey long-eared bats only existing on a thin strip of southern England and Wales. Being so far north compared to the majority of its population, the climate in the UK is actually very different from the average the species will live in, and as this paper points out, suitable environmental conditions for the grey long-eared bat in the UK do not extend much beyond the currently known distribution. The low winter temperatures, high summer rainfall, and availability of grasslands limits just how far into the UK this species is able to spread, which means that only the red zones highlighted on this map actually a suitable habitat that you could expect to find them in. Combining this limited area of environmental suitability with the loss of our natural meadows and marshes, where the grey long-eared bat prefers to forage, means that this species remains extremely rare in the UK. Another species you may see over the UK's marshes and wetlands is the Daubentons Bat. Aptly nicknamed the water bat, this species mostly spends its time over open bodies of water. The extensive network of canals across the UK creates the perfect foraging grounds for the Daubentons bat, while the bridges and bank vegetation create great roosting sites. This has resulted in the species being widely distributed throughout the UK. If you look out over a canal, lake, or slow-moving river at dusk or dawn, you may spot this species flying just a few centimetres over the water. Watch as one grabs an insect from the air, a hunting method that's known as hawking. Here comes another, using its large feet and tail to scoop up insects from the water's surface, a different hunting method that's known as trawling. It can be difficult to detect Daubentons bats in their roosts because they have this habit of squeezing themselves into very tight crevices, so their numbers tend to be underestimated. However, it is much easier to detect them with a bat detector when they're flying around and calling, because they have a very distinctive call of a series of clicks for bouts of about 5 seconds, sounding just like this. Moving on to a very unique looking species, the next bat is the greater horseshoe bat. This species is named after the horseshoe shape of its noseleaf. But what is a noseleaf? Well, this is just the name given to a shape type of a bat's nose. Bats with a noseleaf echolocate through their noses, and the noseleaf shape helps to modify and direct the calls. The noseleaf is really important as a feature for identifying the greater horseshoe bat, as the exact shape and position of it helps to identify particular bat species. The greater horseshoe bat is very rare in the UK and is restricted to the southwest of England and Wales. It's one of the species that's regularly monitored by the National Bat Monitoring Programme, which is a team of volunteers that work together with a variety of different levels of experience to monitor the populations of UK bats. I'd love to hear in the comments below what your favourite bat sighting has been, especially if you've taken part in one of the National Bat Monitoring Project's surveys. Because the greater horseshoe bat prefers to eat larger insects, like beetles and moths, you can usually find them foraging over cattle pastures. In the summer, they will use the edges of these cattle pastures to pick off the emerging dung beetles. In spring and autumn, they'll tend to stick more towards the ancient woodlands at the edge of these cattle pastures, and then in winter, they'll roost in caves. Because they've got all of these different locations that they use, they tend to need to use features to commute along to get between them. This is why, like with many animals, hedgerows are a really important feature to provide shelter while they're commuting. Another UK bat species that has a horseshoe-shaped noseleaf is the lesser horseshoe bat. This bat has a noseleaf that functions much the same way as the greater horseshoe bat's does. However, it's very easy to tell these two species apart. The lesser horseshoe bat is actually about 1/3 of the size of the greater horseshoe bat, and it also has a wingspan of about half the size. In fact, this is one of the smallest bat species in the world, and it only weighs a couple of grams more than the actual smallest bat species in the world, which is the Kitty's hog-nosed bat. Unlike the greater horseshoe bat, the lesser horseshoe bat is found in Ireland, although not in Northern Ireland. This species is also found in Wales and Western England, where it occupies a number of SSSI sites. SSSI is the abbreviation given to a site of special scientific interest and is a protected area that has been identified because of its particular interest to science. This is often due to the presence of rare plants or animals. The smallest SSSI in the UK is the Sylvan House Barn found in Gloucestershire, and it was given this designation due to the presence of lesser horseshoe bats. In fact, the roof of this barn houses 1/5 of Gloucestershire's known breeding population, a large enough number to be considered nationally significant. These bats will fly out from their roost, commuting through the woods to feed among the vegetation of lowland valleys. It's rare to see them fly much higher than 5 metres from the ground. Watch as this one wiggles its ears to help it locate the precise position of prey as it flies. It's rare for a bat species to have such mobile ears, and they make great use of them. It isn't just SSSIs that the lesser horseshoe bats are found in though. They're actually found in multiple of the SACs that I mentioned earlier, which were set aside because of the presence of Bechstein's bats. Although Bechstein's bats were the primary reason for the creation of these SACs, the presence of lesser horseshoe bats, as well as some other species, basically helps to justify the fact that these areas were given the SAC designation. In the UK, it's actually fairly common to find bats of different species that are roosting nearby to each other, or even in some cases, multiple species sharing one single roost. The next bat we're talking about doesn't have a nose leaf, but it does still have clear identifying features. I'm talking about the Natterers Bat, which has otherwise been nicknamed the red-armed bat because its pink limbs can show through clearly against its wings. It also has a tail with short, stiff bristles along the membrane. The Natterers Bat has a unique foraging strategy. They prefer to forage in woodlands and over open water that's sheltered by trees, and they catch insects in mid-air that are hovering only a few centimetres above vegetation. It's unusual that they're able to catch prey mid-flight so close to this dense vegetation. Another unusual foraging strategy that they have been seen implementing is landing on the ground and then running to grab their prey before they take off again. The Natterers Bat has been known about in the UK since the 1800s, but it's very elusive and difficult to study. This is because it has a habit of changing its roosting location very frequently, and it also doesn't actually emerge from its roost until it's practically dark, so it's really hard to spot them doing this emerging behaviour. Despite this, we do know that the species is widespread throughout the UK, although not quite as common as some of our other species. Similar in appearance to the Natterers Bat is the Geoffroys Bat. This is a European species, but it has been seen in the UK. In 2012, an individual was seen in Sussex, and it was then ringed and seen again in 2013. Towards the end of 2013, a different individual was spotted in Brown's Folly by a member of the Avon Bat group. Because this bat species doesn't actually like to travel long distances, and it's quite similar in appearance to our native Natterers Bat species, there's an ongoing debate as to whether or not this species is resident or has just been migrating through and occasionally spotted here. It could be that better surveying techniques over recent years means that we're able to distinguish Natterers and Geoffroys bats a little bit more, or it could be that they're actually expanding their range northwards and will eventually become a new species established in the UK. Either way, surveyors are now on the lookout for its main identifying feature, the notch in the top of its ear. In fact, this feature has earned it the nickname of the notch-eared bat. Because of the limited information about individuals in the UK, it's difficult to know what their lifestyle habits are here. But in Europe, this species forages in dense deciduous woodlands and scrub areas. They also like to roost in cattle sheds, but unfortunately this means they tend to get stuck on the sticky fly papers that are used in the cattle sheds. Another of our native bat species is also found associated with human settlements. The Serotine roosts almost exclusively in old buildings and churches and is rarely found in trees. It's actually one of our most building-oriented species. Sadly though, this does mean that they're under quite a heavy threat from things like toxic timber treatments and building works. This species is also one of the ones that is happy to share their roosts with other species such as pipistrelles, long-eareds, whiskered and noctule bats. The Serotine's call is fairly similar to the noctule and Leisler bat calls, although a few features can help distinguish them. Noctules make a chip-chop sound, like this one I recorded a few months ago. Leisler's bats have a similar call, but a lot more chips than chops come through, making it sound more like this one. A Serotine, on the other hand, has a call with a slightly higher peak than either of these species, and you will only hear the chop sounds. In addition to this, noctules tend to be found in much more open environments, whereas a Serotine prefers to forage along sheltered features like woodland edges and hedgerows. Watch early in the evening, often while it's still light outside, as a Serotine leaves its roost. It will fly at the top tree height, close to the vegetation, and sometimes you might even spot it flopping onto the branches with outstretched wings to pick off larger insects. Looking back towards human settlements, you may also spot them feeding near lampposts as it gets darker, picking off the moths attracted to the light there. With all of the bat species covered in this video and the previous one, we've actually discussed all of our native extant bat species here in the UK. Extant, by the way, means that a species is still surviving in the area, as opposed to extinct, which means that they're no longer there. However, it's really important that we discuss one of the species that's currently considered to be extinct in the UK, which is the greater mouse-eared bat. The greater mouse-eared bat story is a tragic one in the UK. They were only discovered as being present here in 1958, when a colony was found in Dorset. Sadly, it was very badly disturbed, with people taking individuals off to different collections and photography studies, so the colony didn't survive. Hope was renewed for them in the late 1960s, when a second colony was found in Sussex and kept under very close guard. Unfortunately though, in 1985, no females returned to the colony. It's suspected that they perished in a building development or a fire wherever their maternity roost was located. By 1990, there were no more individuals returning to the roost, and the species was officially declared as extinct here. Once again, in 2001, hope was renewed for the greater mouse-eared bat when a single female was found in Sussex, but sadly she died only a few days after being discovered. Once again, the species was considered gone, until once again another individual was found in Sussex in 2002, this time being a year-old male. It's hoped that because of the presence of this young male, a small breeding population of greater mouse-eared bats still exists somewhere in Sussex. Tragically though, since his discovery, there have been no more individual greater mouse-eared bats found, so it could very well be that he is the last one of his kind here. However, despite this species is still listed under the UK's Biodiversity Action Plan. This plan calls for the development and enforcement of national strategies and associated action plans to identify, conserve and protect existing biological diversity and to enhance it wherever possible. For the greater mouse-eared bat, this plan focuses on the necessity to maintain and enhance any populations if they're discovered in the UK, as well as to ensure maximum conservation effort goes into effect should the species begin to re-establish itself. For now, conservation actions that we can undertake are to ensure that areas that they were last known to be found in are protected, because we know these areas were once suitable habitat for them and could be again. The reasons for the greater mouse-eared bat's extinction in the UK are very similar to the reasons that are causing many of our extant species to decline, so we still have lessons to learn from this situation. These reasons include the collection and disturbance of bats in caves, the poisoning of individuals through timber treatment in buildings, the killing or exclusion from nursery sites in larger buildings, reduced numbers of large beetles in grasslands, and the use of agricultural pesticides. By focusing on reducing these impacts, we may be able to save our remaining native bat species. Rather than ending on such a serious note, let's take a look at two more bat species that you could see in the UK. These species aren't native, so no significant numbers of them breed or live here, but you can occasionally spot them as vagrants coming over from the continent. The first vagrant species I'm talking about is the Parti Coloured Bat. This bat gets its name from its distinctive two-coloured fur. It has a reddish to dark brown back with silver white frosted tips, and its underside is almost white. This species is one of the UK's most regular vagrants, which isn't really surprising because in Central Europe they're known to make migratory flights of around 1,500 kilometres. The best time to spot one in the UK is between late October to December, when the males will be making their song flight calls at a peak of around 14 kHz. Finally, we have the northern bat. Unlike the Parti Coloured Bat, this species is actually usually considered sedentary rather than migratory, which means it doesn't tend to fly such long distances. If it does migrate, it tends to be over a period of a few years rather than seasonally. This species is mainly a Northern European species, but despite this, it has been seen in the UK a few times. One showed up in Surrey in 1987, and then two more showed up in 1996 and 2015 on some offshore power installations. In 1993 and 1995, two were also accidentally imported. Now that we've covered 18 of our native bat species in the UK, as well as a few vagrants that may occasionally pop up here, I hope that you've managed to learn something about some of our wildlife. Remember to watch the first video if you haven't already seen it, and also give this video a like to show me that you've found learning about UK bats interesting.